Welcome back to and I know I say this a lot, but it doesn't make it any less true, special episode of the Drunk on Writing Dissections, brought to you in part through the patronage of Ariya Norinth, and a special welcome here. Let's give a special shout out to the channel's newest patron, Kwong Chain. Hey, welcome to the party, pal. Now, why is this a special episode? Because we are looking at one of my favorite sci-fi horror films? Horror film? We're looking at one of my favorite films of all time. 1997's Event Horizon, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, riding high on the success of 1995's Mortal Kombat adaptation, so much so that he turned down the opportunity to direct the first X-Men movie, the first X-Files movie, and Aliens Resurrection to do Event Horizon. Yeah. Written by Philip Eisner and starring a pre-Matrix Lawrence Fishburne, a post-Jurassic Park Sam Neill, and a terrific who's who of an ensemble cast. Why is this one of my favorite films? Well, as with certain other films I've mentioned in past dissections, I was one of the few who saw Event Horizon in theaters. I say few because the movie only made some $26.7 million on a $60 million budget. So yeah, it was a veritable commercial flop, and that's not even to mention what the critics said about the movie. They weren't kind. I did my part. Like I said, I saw this in the theaters when I was 11. If you've seen the movie, let that sink in for a moment. So yeah, the bloody orgy, the psychological nature of the tortures, even the possibility that hell could be real and could be an alternate dimension, Event Horizon stuck with me. I mean, it was a film that was there with me through my formative years, which probably explains quite a bit. And honestly, until I found it on DVD years later, I think I found it in one of those $5 Walmart bins, I only ever saw it that one time. But the cool ass spaceship that made anything from Star Trek or Star Wars look like mere child's toys, which, to their defense, they were. The frightening visuals, unlike anything that I'd personally ever seen before, and, well, to this day, a near endless, absolutely irrational fear of black holes. Yes, even the phrase Event Horizon, taken, of course, from the theoretical point around a black hole where nothing, not even radiation, can escape, and commonly referred to as the point of no return. Even that gives me a little pause when I hear it. These things stuck with me. They're still with me. And yes, I was hesitant when they fired up that large Hadron Collider. Yes, I think it was a bad idea. No, I'm not going to elaborate. I don't seem to be alone in my love for this film because over the years it's picked up something of a cult following. And that's despite weak, seemingly rushed CGI, some more than questionable dialogue choices, including riffs on a few classic Jurassic Park and Back to the Future lines.
Where we're going, we won't need eyes to see.
And some, let's call them odd editing choices. All of which seem to stem from the fact that Event Horizon was completed just 10 months after the movie was greenlit. And Anderson had to kind of crunch up his standard 10-week editing time, his post-production editing, just down to 4 weeks. Due to another movie that you may have heard of being delayed. This tiny little indie flick. I think it was called, what was it called? Titanic. James Cameron's Titanic. But we needed that summer tentpole film. Paramount needed that summer tentpole, and they assumed Event Horizon would be that big summer blockbuster. Boy, were they surprised, don't you think, when when Anderson handed them this 130-minute film with unfinished special effects, a poor sound mix, and just so much gore, just so chock full, jam-packed with gore that some in the test screening actually fainted. This version of the film also got the dreaded NC-17 rating. None of that is any good. We couldn't have any of that. Paramount couldn't have any of that. How are you going to have a summer blockbuster that is rated NC-17? Nobody's going to see that. Nobody will probably even put that in their own theater. So Paramount, of course, demanded that the movie be edited down, that some of the gore be removed. And within a week, Anderson and editor Martin Hunter had cut 45 minutes out of the film, bringing it down to a paltry 95. A nice quick 95 minutes. Did I say 45 there? 95 minutes. The film goes by like that. I mean, it's a very quick-paced film. And some of what was cut included some story beats, some character development, some much-needed time with the story before all hell breaks loose. And in terms of the gore, they said that they wanted to cut the gore out. I can't imagine how much gore was actually in this thing, because just the glimpses of the cannibalism and dismemberment and just general carnage that is left in the film, all of which was apparently inspired by the works of 6th century Renaissance painters Hieronymus Bosch and Peter Bruegel, which director Paul W.S. Anderson saw while he was touring art galleries with his production designer. I mean, who says hell can't be beautiful, right? But just, can you imagine more of that? We'll get to that a little bit later, but it's also worth noting that from that initial cut, the ending was reworked, it was reshot, it was re-edited. The final theatrical version, this combination of 2 alternate endings. And while the film was perhaps cut to the very bone of a narrative, I think it works. I think it really does work in this mean, lean format that we found ourselves having. And I think much of this has to do with the strong core cast and a bevy of references, homages, influences, and sheer emulations stacked into almost every single minute of the film. Let's tackle those one at a time, shall we? The film's led by Lawrence Fishburne's Miller, captain of the Lewis and Clark, and a no-nonsense SOB haunted by a past decision that cost the life of a crew member who he left to a horrible, fiery fate. This gives us what may be the film's most poetic line of dialogue.
You ever seen fire in zero gravity? It's beautiful. It's like liquid. It slides all over everything. Comes up in waves. And they just kept hitting him. Wave after wave.
Which is delivered on excellently at the climax of the film when we actually see those waves. Though I don't think fire can actually exist in a vacuum. I don't know, I'm no scientist, but actually Miller is given some of the just best, most fulfilling lines in the entire film, especially his stoic, just nonchalant reaction to seeing the bloody orgy for the first time.
We're leaving.
He's a fantastic character, and he's paired against Sam Neill's Dr. Weir, another fantastic character, designer of the Event Horizon and its gravity drive, and probably the main reason Eisner pitched this film as The Shining in space. He also gets the honor of delivering what may be my most quoted line of any movie. Rounding out the main cast is Kathleen Kinlan, still somewhat fresh off her Academy Award-nominated role in Apollo 13, as medical technician Peters, who's haunted by visions of her, I want to say paralyzed son, possibly autistic son. It's left a little vague, but she does have the honor of being the first of the main characters to die. So she's got that going for her. Jolie Richardson, probably best known for her later role as Julia McNamara in FX's Nip Tuck, is given comparatively very little to do as second in command Lieutenant Stark, though she does do a good deal of screaming and is the star of the final scene, along with Richard T. Jones's Cooper, a rescue technician with horrible, but at times welcome, on-the-nose, almost cringe-worthy dialogue that nonetheless made me laugh.
Here I come, motherfucker!
We also have Jack Noseworthy as the unfortunate engineer, unfortunate baby bear Ensign Justin, who you just want to give him a hug. He needs a hug. Jason Isaacs as DJ, the conveniently Latin-knowing doctor. Hopefully I'm not the only one who finds it odd that everyone working at TDRS in Houston in the future, along with, I don't even know if it qualifies as language, Dr. Weir, that none of them can recognize Latin in this recording. Come on, you just happen to have this one person on the crew who can recognize it as Latin and translate it? So convenient. Love convenient writing like that. It's kind of like those movies where that one kid who's trudging along and has nothing else to contribute to the plot happens to know Morse code and can figure out that somebody is calling for SOS on the other side of like this hall or something over here. It's exactly like that. So great. Love it. Isaacs, by the way, actually created his own backstory for his character, his pretty badass character, in which he'd had extensive surgery as a child, which would explain all the scars that you see on him. He also apparently was denied a request to take home his vivisected double. What a shame, let the guy have it. And finally, Sean Pertwee as perhaps my personal favorite character, Smitty, the pilot, whose Anka tattoo on his back seems rather appropriate, or maybe inappropriate. Depends on how you look at it. I also rather love the lengths he went to try to save the Lewis and Clark. Good man. Thorough. They're a fun, believable crew who you can feel have a history together, and that's despite us never really getting a full, long chance to really get to know them. Again, the movie's only 95 minutes long, and the horror starts in probably about halfway through. But that's very reminiscent of another classic film, another classic sci-fi film, another classic sci-fi horror film, Alien. And that's not necessarily just a coincidence. Event Horizon absolutely ripped off Alien. Ripped off? Maybe riffed off. And also Hellraiser, and The Haunting, and Solaris, and The Abyss, and even Warhammer 40k. Now, I said earlier that I saw this film originally as a kid, and when I saw it, all of these references went right straight clear over my head. But as an adult, and hopefully as many of the adults who saw this movie in the theaters probably realized, Event Horizon wears all of these references right on its sleeves. It's really not hiding anything at all. It's almost rather proud of its heritage. Well, maybe, it's not hiding anything except for maybe the X-Wing fighter, which I found a bit hard to spot on the antenna array, but which is apparently no less there. Can't imagine that'd fly if Disney owned those Star Wars rights back in '97. Actually, before we get into talking about Alien, that's just one of a number of Easter eggs that are found throughout the movie, and I'm sure that they probably would have shoved a bit more into there if they actually had time to make the film. But if you keep your eyes and ears peeled, since we're talking about Event Horizon, I should note, not literally, you might notice a nod to the thematically similar series Doom near the start of the movie when Dr. Weir opens his blinds. They make the exact same sound as doors opening in the popular video game. The shot that follows, by the way, where we pull back to a rotating look at a space station, took 10 weeks to make and cost nearly a third of the visual effects budget. Early on, you also spot a book floating past the camera with a shot of Anderson on it along with his name. In the DVD commentary, he actually jokes that it's his autobiography, Paul Anderson, A Life. A little later, you might have caught the Omega Speedmaster floating along, which is the same watch worn by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin as they journey to the moon. The patches worn by the crew include a 55-star American flag, the symbol for the European Union, and an Australian flag featuring the Aboriginal flag in place of Britain's Union Jack. Event Horizon is set just 27 years from today, so we'll see how that all turns out. There's also an homage to the Purge screen seen in both Blade Runner and Alien when Cooper breaks the tension with his, goofy dialogue and jetpacks back to the ship. And there we are, back to Alien, though clearly that blink and you'll miss it moment is not the only influence that Alien had on Event Horizon. In fact, Alien was so influential on not just the aesthetics of Event Horizon, which is pretty obvious, but the story that, though Anderson liked Eisner's original script, which involved the cruise ship Event Horizon being haunted by tentacular extra-dimensional monsters, I can only assume something visually along the lines of the exoskeletons we'd see in 1996's Independence Day, which by chance happened to release while this film was in pre-production. He thought it too similar to Alien and obviously gave it a pretty major uncredited rewrite. Though, I gotta say, the practical spacesuits, which weighed about 65 pounds apiece and needed to be shackled to poles between takes so the actors wouldn't hurt their backs, and also included things like a blower system to keep the visor clear and the actors cool, thousands of LEDs that could pulsate at different speeds, and even industrial magnets embedded in the boots to add to the realism. These very much scream Alien at me, and just their practicality, the fact that they were based on stuff that we already have. I mean, it just harkens back to that original film. And when looking at Event Horizon and thinking about Alien, you start to notice a few more things like that. Like the crews and the crew's missions, for instance. Just hear me out here. In Alien, reluctant haulers check out a distress signal and all hell breaks loose. In Event Horizon, a reluctant rescue team, let's call them a rescue team, checks out a distress signal and all hell literally breaks loose. I mean, it's not much of a surprise given Alien's impact on sci-fi ever since it was released, but Event Horizon seems to take it a step further than every other film that just was an homage to Alien, especially in regard to the design of the ship, the Event Horizon herself. Not only do we get these shots of the exterior that make it just look huge, but we get these looks inside, or these long, dark, shadowy corridors, eerily evocative of Alien's Nostromo. Models designer David Sharp certainly seemed to follow Ridley Scott's original intent on the design of the Nostromo when creating the Event Horizon, as they're both modeled after, get this is a new one for me, cathedrals. The Nostromo being reminiscent of an inverted cathedral, and the Event Horizon literally incorporating scanned elements from the Notre Dame into its design, from flying buttresses to ornate pillars and more. The ship's thruster pods, for instance, are the Notre Dame towers, the literal towers. Apparently you can even see a crucifix in one shot. Of course, that's all to capture that terror-invoking Gothic aesthetic, which makes very little sense in terms of practicality. I mean, why would you want anything pointy in space? I think Cooper put it best when he finally laid eyes on the spikes strewn about the core when he was rescuing Justin. What did he say?
What the fuck is this?
But despite the impracticality, and you can kind of excuse it because it probably had something to do with harnessing the power of the black hole or something, it's beautiful. I mean, it looks great on screen. And that beauty continues throughout the entirety of the ship, where we get these vaulted ceilings, these ornate-looking doors, even the eye-shaped central corridor, which was apparently designed to represent Dante Alighieri's 9 circles of hell, leading, of course, to the heart of hell itself, the gravity drive, which, just as in the movie Contact, released 35 days earlier, uses a 3-ringed system to create a black hole superhighway. Going back to Alien for a second, though, doesn't the design of this just seem overly evocative of the chamber Alien Space Jockey is in? Doesn't it? It just kind of, just the whole semblance of the whole framing of it. The theory behind the gravity drive and the story behind Event Horizon itself also borrows heavily from the miniature wargame Warhammer 40k, wherein starships travel the galaxy using the warp, also referred to as the Immaterium, a parallel dimension where faster-than-light travel is possible, but which is also infested with demons that can infiltrate the ship and possess the crew. Some even consider Event Horizon an unofficial prequel to the game. But it's not just Alien or Warhammer that Event Horizon apes. As the story progresses, it's clear that Event Horizon was influenced by the likes of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and the 1963 Haunting of Hill House adaptation, the first Hill House adaptation, I should add, The Haunting. Both of which fall into, as does Event Horizon, one of the 4 horror archetypes that Stephen King defines in his nonfiction treatise Danse Macabre. That is, the bad place, more commonly referred to as the haunted house. But it's not just any haunted house, is it? It's a haunted house that is alive, or in this case, a ship that is alive, and one that manipulates, coerces, tortures, taking the conflicted hero, in this case, Dr. Weir, and, as with Jack Torrance in The Shining, or even Michael Biehn's Lieutenant Coffey from The Abyss, both of which were credited by Eisner as inspiration for his screenplay, taking who should, by all accounts, be a good guy, and twisting, turning, gouging him into submitting to its will. And the film actually goes a bit out of its way to ensure these similarities aren't missed by anyone. We get the scene between Weir and his wife Claire, who he recalls finding in a bathtub, much like Jack found the woman in 217 in The Shining. Or, sticking to that film, and even closer in appearance, the gravity tank shattering in slow motion to reveal a tidal wave of blood, as with the infamous elevator sequence. That scene originally showed Weir inside the tank, pounding on the inside of the glass until it shattered, after which he did this upside down exorcist-like crawl down the ladder. Shame all of that was cut. I don't know why all of that needed to be cut. But calling back to the haunting, when Peters is, well, haunted by an unseen but very much heard entity, clearly harkening back to the classic film. Both of those scenes, though, they're paired with just far more gruesome visuals than we ever saw in any of those more thought-provoking films. Stuff that's more along the lines of the Hellraiser series. In fact, the similarities are so strong that a fairly prominent theory supposes that Event Horizon takes place within the Hellraiser universe. If you aren't familiar with the series, it focuses on a puzzle box, the Lament configuration, which opens a gateway to hell, basically. Home of the scarred, mutilated, leather-clad, formerly human Cenobites who perform rather sadistic experiments. Not so different from Weir's final form, is it? Which I only just discovered his nickname, the Beast, when I was watching the credits. And not only does the deceased captain holding his eyes closely mirror a scene from Hellraiser 2 Hellbound, or DJ's head dangling from hooks nearly completely replicate an infamous scene from the very first film, but the gravity drive itself, while evoking that space jockey and built on Warhammer and so similar to what Contact did, is, as is the door leading into it, also designed as an homage to Hellraiser's puzzle box. Given we're explicitly shown that Weir mutilates himself, I don't believe Event Horizon actually is within the Hellraiser universe, but Hellraiser's creator, Clive Barker, was on hand to consult with the film, so, who am I to say? Back to the scene between Weir and his wife Claire, though. That's also building on themes established in Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris, as, in that classic film, the protagonist's wife also committed suicide, reappearing within the film as a manifestation of her former self and almost taunting him. Actually, though they're wildly different films, I could almost not think of two films more polar opposites. There are a lot of parallels between the two, especially in the rather thematic endings. But the exploration of depression, I think, is the most apparent between the two. Event Horizon, honestly, is all about depression. Really, I mean, you could probably write an entire thesis on it. We get not only Weir's wife Claire's suicide, obviously, but Justin's attempted suicide after being so affected by what he saw on the other side of the black hole, the haunting, violent flashes of thought that impact the crew throughout the film, just as those with depression disorders face on a daily basis, the regrets for past deeds, the haunting of those, confronting those mistakes. It's all there. And perhaps the film isn't the brilliant vision Anderson originally believed it would be, thought it would be, maybe possibly delivered. But I think in this final form, it's a powerful piece of nuanced film. And going back to what I said earlier, going back to those edits, I hesitate to say that more gore would have made this film better. I think part of what I find so captivating about Event Horizon are those glimpses, are those glances into the dark, as Justin puts it. The so-called bloody orgy, for instance, would a longer version filled with the amputees that they hired and the porn stars, all of which were made to make the sex and the rape and the sheer just violence more realistic and graphic, would that have actually improved the film? I mean, as it is, Event Horizons inspired the likes of Danny Boyle's Sunshine, Visceral's Dead Space, Chris Nolan's Interstellar, the Star Trek spoof Galaxy Quest, and even the Stephen King's Desperation. And that's just to name a few. So, yeah, I'm not so sure. And Anderson himself feels that the film would benefit from just maybe about 10 minutes of what was cut put back into the film. I'm not exactly sure what that would include, which scenes that he would cherry pick out of the bunch, but of the scenes nixed, we do have some details. They included an early meeting between Weir and some bigwigs, some dialogue from which was in the original so spoilery trailer, additional backstory for Cooper and Justin, including more reason for Justin entering the black hole, and some details on Cooper's fear of losing someone close to him, a romantic subplot between Miller and Stark, which would have been pretty interesting given Jolie Richardson's character was originally written to be portrayed by a male actor, more scenes explaining the science behind the black hole, an odd scene where Justin turns into Claire, Weir's wife, of course, who taunts him yet again, and longer versions of Peter seeing her son's legs covered in maggots, Weir remembering Claire's suicide, the bloody orgy, of course, DJ hanging above the surgery table, and the Visions of Hell sequence. There have been calls for a director's cut to reinstate some, if not all, of these cuts, but unfortunately the extra footage wasn't well preserved. Some were oddly discovered in a Transylvanian salt mine years later, degraded past the point of no return. They'd gone over the event horizon, as it were. Insert the rim shot here, right here. No. A VHS copy of the original rough cut was also found in 2012, but even that was apparently too damaged and seemingly thrown away. I really hope that's not true, and what I read about that was just complete lies. Because I want to say that there's still hope. Not only were there reports in 2019 of Paramount Television and Amazon Studios developing a series based on the film, which could bring far more development to the characters and the story and possibly incorporate some of the ideas that were in those cut scenes. But a recently announced Blu-ray transfer from Screen Factory due fall 2020 is looking to include any and all previously lost footage. After watching my DVD the other day, seeing all that blank real estate around the image because the resolution is just that low, yeah, a 4K transfer is going to be a day one purchase for me. I can't wait to watch it. Maybe I'll actually be able to spot that X-Wing and crucifix finally. Won't that be cool? This has been the Drunk on Writing dissection of Event Horizon, and I am pretty sad that it is done. But I feel like I got pretty much everything out in here. I talked about the plot, talked about the characters, talked about the deleted scenes, talked about just the fun, thematic nuances of the film. This is a fantastic film, and I wish there was more of it. That's it. I maybe I'll just watch it again after this. I mean, it's 9:21 while I'm filming, but hey, why not? Who's to say that I need to go to bed right away? I can go watch this film again. Maybe I'll just play The Witcher 3. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Please leave a comment below. Please like the video. Please share it with your friends. And please head on over to drunkonwriting.com and help support the channel, where you're also going to get every video early. You're going to get access to the exclusive video club and so much more. There's so many goodies over there. It's just, it's paradise for all of you guys watching this. I think I'm tired. Until next time, as always, cheers and keep on.